Save the Semantics, episode 199. It is February 5th, 2023. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Can't believe we're already in February. Isn't that fucking crazy? It's not that crazy, actually. It feels like a month has passed. It's gonna be my birthday week. Yeah, it's gonna be my birthday this upcoming week, which is cool. I'm sort of, what's the word? There's a word for it. Nonplussed, unbothered. I don't have any strong feelings about it other than the fact that it's my birthday. I'm not like, oh fuck, I'm getting old. I was just kind of, it is what it is at this point, honestly. Here's the thing. I think maybe once I hit I don't know, late 30s or something. I don't know. I feel like at that point I'm probably going to be fine in terms of like my age. I'm like, I'm not even going to really even give a shit. Like right now I don't really care too much. Yeah, it's going to be my birthday, which it's been this way for the last few years now, where it's kind of fallen on the period in which I am the most busy during work, which is, it is what it is. I try to I try to do the most that I can to, enjoy my time and whatnot. But, yeah, it's alright. I'm looking forward to it. Don't have any big plans necessarily. Yeah, I don't do too much or I haven't really done much during my birthday for a while now. That's kind of just been the case. But, yeah, not a whole lot else to really say on that part. This past week's been it's been both. I mean that this could really be any day of the week or any week during the year, but it was both kind of good and bad, I guess. I started off the week pretty strong, where I felt like really good about like the first 2 days of the week, like Monday and Tuesday. I was like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna get shit done. Um, I felt that I got good sleep during those 2 days, and then it just kind of started to fall apart halfway through the week, where I just kind of gave up on really trying to be consistent with my sleep schedule. Um, it just comes down to being consistent, being firm with myself, and just not, you know, trying not to allow other distractions to kind of come into the mix, I guess. I mean, those are gonna just pop up anyway, regardless. But um, I want to be a little bit more, uh, you know, I like how I felt that during like the first half of the week. Like I felt like pretty good about myself. Like I felt like, I don't know, in it. I felt healthy for the most part. I felt kind of awake and alert, and then it just sort of it just fell apart. Um, so going into next week, or going into this week rather, um, it's just, of course, starting off strong is good, but it's just trying to keep that is important. It's hard though. It's really hard, Um, like I feel like I have to hit like a reset button of sorts in order to get my shit together, in a sense. But yeah, it really just comes down to me being a little more, as always, just being more firm with myself, and being uh, sticking to kind of a plan of sorts. Anyways, in terms of other things that I've just sort of been, I don't know, watching, playing. Been playing some Xenoblade again. I've been enjoying my time, just kind of doing post game stuff, and not really having like I don't know. I'm not necessarily striving for 100%, just because I think that sounds exhausting. I don't think I've ever really 100% at a game ever. I don't think. I've never done, I've never been someone who has prioritized achievement hunting. It's fun to do that, on occasion, but it's not something that's like the primary objective of the game. Especially when it comes to RPGs, my my sort of intention, or generally how I like to play RPGs, is focusing on the story and getting through that, and then doing other side content, whatever, whenever I feel like it. So it's just kind of a typical gaming kind of mindset, I guess you could say. Um, I I think that once you start to splurge or try to attempt to do everything the game can offer, I think is a little exhaustive, and it just takes away from your enjoyment that you initially had when playing the game. And you know what? Some people do enjoy that. Some people really just enjoy seeking out and doing everything that the game has to offer, which is great. But I just never felt that way towards completing a game. Like I'm gonna play the game until I feel I've done everything that I've wanted to. And for Xenoblade 3, I've talked about how I sort of reached kind of that point after I completed the main story and did some of the other more, I guess, quote unquote important side content. But I've still there's still plenty of things to do in the game, which is kind of, in my case, just like dicking around and getting it's like crafting gems, completing some other side quests that might lead to like discovering new locations that I haven't discovered yet. I think there's a lot of fun in that. And then also kind of getting better at the combat, optimizing certain party sets. I think that sort of thing is really, I don't know. I've sort of enjoyed my time doing that recently. Um, I yeah, so like right now I'm trying to get like certain gem crafts that I think that could be like helpful, or it could be just fun to get. Um, just like boosting like critical hits and boosting attack and that sort of thing. Um, and then also there's still a few other like side content, like quests, that I think could be like fun to complete, to really like round out the overall story. So I still have that on my plate. It's just been good. It's There's just been not really a whole lot of pressure for me to do much. And again, I've mentioned this before, but I do want to play the game in the Japanese language setting, or like at least the Japanese audio. And so I'm kind of prepping myself to do like a new game plus run with Japanese, and just kind of enjoy the differences that it has versus like the English dub. Um, I feel, in regards to the other games, uh, I think the first Xenoblade game, I feel like both the English and Japanese were both like very strong. Um, and so I don't necessarily have too much of a preference, although I do enjoy the English, I guess, a little bit more, just because like there's a lot more I don't know, there's a lot more memorable lines with the English in my head, as opposed to the Japanese. But the Japanese dub, the original dub, is still really good. And then I've talked about Xenoblade 2, sort of my criticisms of that dub and all that, but we don't need to get into that. But I feel like this series is really the only one where I have preferred the dub over like the original Japanese. I think that, especially when it comes to anime specifically, a lot of the slang, a lot of the use of language, the humor, it's really hard to translate that into English, in my opinion. It's really hard to kind of convey certain quirks in Japanese to English. Um, Sometimes with dubs, it just feels awkward. I think the translators or whoever, they're doing the best they can to overcome these kinds of differences, but I just don't. It's just hard for me to kind of buy into that, really. So it's like if I had the option to, I'd much rather just listen to the original Japanese version, just because I think that it sort of puts into context the original like intent of like a certain dialogue or certain like pieces of like I guess storytelling. I guess it's really hard to do that. So I do want to give props to like the English like translators for Japanese media, because I know that shit can be really fucking hard. Um, Among other things, speaking of anime, I started watching Ranking of Kings. I've wanted to watch that for quite a while, since I heard about it for the first time. I'm not sure why this was the one that is. There's like so much more. There's a ton. There's a ton of anime out there, but for some reason I was kind of drawn to this one. I think maybe it was like the art style, the premise behind it. Um, Maybe there's just like a bit more of a sense of lightheartedness, even though that's not really true at all. The show's pretty dark in a lot of aspects, but I think I don't know. There's just a certain charm to it that kind of drew me in, as opposed to some other of the more serious or more established anime shows. Um, I'm about halfway through the first season. I forgot if they greenlit the second season or whatnot, but right now I'm halfway through the first season, and I am really enjoying it. I think this show it does something really interesting, um, where it's not a shonen show. That's the one thing. Even though it has some elements to it for sure, I think it differentiates itself from other, I guess like you could say shonen or more just kind of traditional anime, where it doesn't overly explain itself. It doesn't like um you don't get this like inner dialogue. I mean you do, but it's not super, I guess, intrusive to the story to the point where like half of an episode is dedicated to someone's like inner monologue. Um like you don't I think the actions of these characters speak much more than what they have to say, in terms of what their motivations are. And I think that I have to commend the show for that. It also doesn't there's a lot of mysteries. There's a lot of weird shit that's going on. Um, and they haven't really explained what all of these things are yet. Like they're just kind of like slowly peeling back the layers, and I really like that. There are certain things that are kind of explained to us to in a sense, but it's not like, oh, this is like, I don't know, this is like this character's motivation because blah 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 blah. He was jealous of this like they don't like say it explicitly. Like they, they'll show it. It's kind of like a sequence, but you don't have like a character explaining what's going on exactly. You know what I mean? I think that's really, I think that shows, I think that gives the show a lot of strength, which I appreciate, because like I think I love, for example, one of my favorite anime, Hunter x Hunter. I love that show, but I think that one of the critiques that I have of it is that, especially in the Chimera Ant arc, while it is an incredible like sequence of events and an incredible arc, I think there is a point where some things are like over explained, like in far too much detail, where I wish that there was a little bit less exposition and narrative and instead a little bit more like action done by the characters. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of these things could have been better done without like some overarching, like, the narrator is like basically a character in that arc. He's there to explain character motivations, which is good, and you understand. It gives a lot of these like individual, maybe somewhat minor characters some depth, which I appreciate. But I think in terms of enjoying it as an animation, it kind of falters a little bit to some regard. And I understand why some people might have, why they might not consider it to be super enjoyable. I still love it. I haven't watched it in a long time. I don't know if I'll get around to watching it again, but I can kind of see why some people might not enjoy that type of storytelling. So, in myself, I feel there was a bit too much of that. It was leaning too much on kind of the narrator explaining in detail some of the significance of the characters and their motivations and whatnot. And I feel that Ranking of Kings does a really good job of not doing that, showing the characters actually doing certain things, and you understand why they are kind of doing these things. And even if you don't understand, you're intrigued, and you're kind of you want to learn more, so that makes you want to keep watching the show. And there's this kind of this there's a lot of mysteries, and you're like, why, what the fuck is going on? Like, what is this thing? Like, they didn't tell me shit. Like, it's intriguing, it's good. Like, it doesn't, like, I like that it doesn't explain itself, you know what I mean? And I appreciate that. So I'm pretty invested. I've thoroughly enjoyed the show so far. It's been a great time. Among other things, I touched upon this kind of briefly last time as well, but there's been kind of rumors about like a Nintendo Direct that could be happening this week. Last year, the Direct happened on my birthday, which I very remember very vividly, because that's when Xenoblade 3 was announced that it was going to be released. That was great. That was a great birthday gift, you know what I mean? So, if it happens to land on my birthday again, that would be great. I honestly don't, the only game that I really care about playing this year in particular that's going to be released this year is the, Tears of the Kingdom, really. I think my sort of prediction in regards to that is, I think that they're going to do kind of like a teaser during the Direct itself. They're going to announce a Tears of the Kingdom Direct, maybe sometime in the future, you know what I mean, before the release date in May, which is crazy to think about. That shit's less than 100 days, less than like maybe like in 3 months from now is coming out, which is wild. But I feel that they're gonna do a little teaser thing and then announce that there's gonna be a Tears of the Kingdom Direct, sometime in the future. That's gonna be my prediction. In terms of other releases, and who knows, by the time I post this, like the Direct might have already happened. So, and then I'll be talking about it maybe next week or something. But yeah, in terms of other releases, I don't really. Again, I already have so much shit that I want to play that's like on my backlog. That again, I'll. Who knows if I'll get to them? I think I'll eventually get to it. Like, I still have Persona and all that. Like, there's still a lot of games that I need to like actually play through. So I think it's just going to be exciting to kind of see what comes out this year, or what comes out in the next couple of years. Yeah, so I'll be keeping my eye out for that. Again, the rumors, it seems like it's pretty. The rumors are pretty solidified. Like, it seems like that this is going to actually be a thing. So, yeah, keeping my eye out for that. Again, last February Direct happened on my birthday, so maybe we get the same thing again this year. So that's pretty exciting. I also watched the first half of Glass Onion, which I may or may not finish today, or who the fuck knows? I don't know. I'm probably gonna watch it. I'm gonna watch it sometime. I actually watched the first half of it with my dad. Like, it was like, maybe it was the last week. I forgot. Maybe it was like a couple weeks back, but I was sort of like, I had seen the first, or I guess I had seen Knives Out, so I kind of knew what to expect going into this one. I told my dad, like, he's a fan of like Hercule Poirot and other detective stories, like, you know, some of the older like Sherlock Holmes. And so I told him that, you know, this series is kind of in line with that, and kind of in terms of just the, you know, the detective, and, you know, uncovering the story, this like brilliant detective, and you know, it's the who done it, right? Like, he's a fan of that. He wasn't really a fan of. We only watched the first half of it. He wasn't really a fan of Glass Onion. I think here's the thing. I sort of set the expectation that this was going to be kind of similar to those like older British detective shows, stories. I feel like the modern humor and the modern style, it was a bit of a turn off for him in particular, which is, you know, I understand. I think like I was like, yeah, this is gonna be something along the lines of like, you know, this maybe slow paced, you know, dialogue kind of driven with Poirot going, you know, in his like French accent, just be going, there's a mystery or solved that need to be solved, and then there's like, you know, it's like two shots. How do I explain it? I don't know how like filmography works all that well. The cinematography is pretty simple for those like older programs. It's like, you know, one shot of Poirot talking, and then it cuts to the other character talking, and then it cuts back to Poirot. It's very simple, you know what I mean? And then Glass Onion, you have the first sequence of the movie is you have all these characters. You don't really understand what is going on, which is, you know, I guess, you know, you could argue as part of like the mystery and stuff, but I'm sort of seeing it from the perspective of my dad, where it's like you get all these shots, just like quick cuts, quick cuts. The camera is like spinning around in this room where there's a party going on, supposedly taking place during COVID, and then you have like split, like, you know, split screens of all these different characters like trying to solve the thing at once. And then and then you got Daniel Craig playing Among Us with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? You know what I mean? He doesn't know what Among Us is. Like, this shit is just going completely over his head. Like, a lot, like, the humor in it works for me to an extent. I think it's funny because it shows a lot of these out of touch people interacting with, interacting during COVID, and it's like, oh fuck, this is like, you know, pretentious, and you know, these people are pretty horrible, and, you know, they're, you know, more like questionably, you know, morally questionable, right? And then you got like Dave Bautista, who's playing he plays like this Twitch streamer, and then he lives with his mom, and he's kind of representing, you know, someone that's like kind of like the red pill, Andrew Tate kind of thing, where, you know, he's trying to push these, that kind of character. But that, like, that, this shit is all like, these are references, like, these are very, very modern references within the last like couple of years, and this shit is just completely, I'm sure this is just completely going over his head. So it just didn't really work for him. So I understand that. I just think it's just so funny. Like, you know, I like, obviously you don't have to necessarily be my age or in the know to understand a lot of these, but like, for someone who isn't online at all, like my dad, like, this is just not this is nonsense. Like, this is just like a bunch of fucking references. You're like, what the hell is this? I think, now I've only seen the first half of this. My intention is I'm gonna watch it by myself anyway, the second half of Glass Onion. I feel that this movie is not going to age very well. I think that it relies very much on the context of what is going on currently, right? Like it's referencing COVID, it's referencing things that happened in 2020, that sort of thing. It'll be a really interesting kind of, you could argue it's like an interesting period piece, I guess, maybe 10 years from now on. But I think a lot of this is not going to age very well. Just because there's so much like current references that I think it's going to be funny to look back on and see, but for people that are, if there are like kids 20 years from now watching it, they'll be like, okay, that's kind of funny, but I also don't really get it. That's kind of the case with, I don't know, some older comedies, you could argue. Back in like the 80s, they're like referencing things from the 50s, and you're like, okay, that's funny, I guess, but I don't really understand what it's referencing unless I was there in the know. I feel that I don't get the full context of it, and that feels very much in line with Glass Onion. I don't think it's going to age very well. It's fun. It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it so far. But I just don't think it's not going to be a classical. It's not going to be a classic like detective movie. I think Knives Out is a lot more. I can watch that movie later down the road and still get a lot of enjoyment out of it without really, like, there's really not that much that is like holding it back. Like there are some references here and there to, current media and some pop culture references here and there, but it's very few and far in between. And I think with Glass Onion, it starts out of the gate with all of these things that are just like coming in. You're like, okay, I enjoy it. I get these references and I think it's funny, but also if you aren't, if you're not like online, like, like my dad, like this shit is just not, it's just not hitting. Like it's just not, like you're not really understanding what is kind of happening, I guess. You know what I mean? But yeah, anyways, I'm probably going to finish that movie today or whenever the fuck I want. Really. Just whenever I feel. And then maybe I'm going to play some more Xenoblade 3 because I've been enjoying just kind of just digging around, man. I'm just, I don't really have a specific goal in mind, just certain things. Oh, maybe I'm going to do this. Oh, maybe I'll do this quest or, gather some materials or whatnot. That's been fun. That's been a lot of fun. So yeah, I know some crazy. I know a lot has happened in the NBA recently. I don't know if I have a lot to say about it though. I think it's just a lot of shit's been going on. So again, I haven't really watched a ton of basketball, so I'm gonna hold off my thoughts until I kind of get back into that world. For now, this is where I am, and eventually I'll come back to basketball. It's always gonna be there. So, yeah. Anyways, thank you for listening. That's gonna be it for today. This has been Save the Semantics. Signing off.